Why should American Indians vote for Donald Trump? While I was working on updating my website, Backlash.com, I came across this question and got distracted answering it. Will Trump be good for Indian country? The answer to that question, it seems to me, depends on how you define Indian country. Many of us think of the Americas as being Indian country, but that's not what's usually meant. Most people might say that Indian tribes are Indian country. The problem with this, however, is that Indian tribes come in essentially two flavors, historical and governmental. Historical tribes are the names we know from history, names like Cascade and Mohican. These tribes exist in history, but their modern governments are the Cowlitz and Mohegan. Are the tribal governments Indian country? Many might say yes, and if that's the case, then Donald Trump might be less remunerative for the tribal governments than Hillary Clinton would. In an October 19th, 2015 Indian Country Today article demonstrating that he doesn't know the difference between classical liberals and conservatives on the one hand and neocons on the other, Gyasi characterized Donald Trump's followers as neoconservative bigots and demonstrating the kind of racism that characterizes certain segments of Indian country. He dismissed Trump and his supporters as, quote, white immigrants who don't like brown immigrants, close quote. Immigrants, meaning the people whose grandfathers or great-grandfathers or great-great-great-great-great-grandparents came over here 500 or 400 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 50 years ago. Let me expose this racism by first stating that I am a Native American. I am also an American Indian. All American Indians are Native Americans, but not all Native Americans are American Indians. About 50 years ago, race baiters set out to confuse the issue by claiming that the term American Indian is racist, and that the politically correct term to use for descendants of American Aborigines is Native American. Unfortunately for these race baiters, then and now, only about half of Indian country accepted this nonsense. Moreover, most tribes, even if they officially accept this nonsense, still unofficially expose it for a lie in how they refer to their tribe or tribal nation. My tribe, for example. I am not a member of the Cowlitz Native American tribe. If you go to my tribe's website, you'll see what I mean. It says Cowlitz Indian Tribe. You will find no Indian tribes or nations who have Native American in their name. You will, however, find many tribes that refer to their reservation as an Indian reservation. A Native American is anybody who is born an American. Racists reject that. And that's okay, everybody has a right to their prejudices. But sweeping accusations aside that Trump is racist based on his reasonable statements about illegal immigrants and observations about the Mashantucket Pequots that even members of other Indian tribes have made, that being that the Pequots look more black than Indian, Ross offers no detailed explanation for why he thinks Trump would be bad for Indian country. Yes, in the past, Trump has made insulting comments about Indian tribes that threaten to compete with his business interests, but then he has also made insulting remarks about other competitors. So, football players, prize fighters, and men in general often mock one another. Special snowflakes, feminists, race baiters, and other social justice warriors take umbrage at the merest slight or disagreement. Grown-ups remember the childhood admonishment that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But then, social justice warriors now use words like weapons to compel authorities to destroy all with whom they disagree. Mainstream articles point to Trump's apparent position on states' rights and whether federal lands should be turned over to states, calling it a land grab that would harm Indians. Trump, they say, would side with this, and they point to the ruckus over the Bundy case, which has been much in the news, with the Bundy Ranch pitted in battle against the Bureau of Land Management. What's not so much in the news is that while, yes, the Bundys are white, and they are fighting the Bureau of Land Management in Nevada, other Nevada ranchers who are fighting the Bureau of Land Management over exactly the same issues include Shoshone Indians, like Carrie Dan and Raymond Yowell. So while there are tribal governments who oppose handing federal lands over to states, some Indians might be in favor of it given their rough treatment at the hands of the federal bureaucracies. So in the end, there's no clear picture of whether Donald Trump would be a good for Indian governments. But Indian governments are only a part of Indian country. Years ago, my Cherokee teacher, Lee Piper, also known as Ujidali, said Indian country is wherever you find Indians in the Americas. And while we could not say whether Trump would be good, bad, or indifferent for tribal governments, I'd argue that he will be very good for American Indians, because I reject the idea that tribal membership is about feeding at the public trough. Politics, as Andrew Breitbart said, is downstream from culture. And before there were Indian reservations, tribal culture had nothing at all to do with dependence on government. Tribal culture was about survival, and it required everybody to pitch in. Not that they were socialists, no. Yes, Indian tribes had communal living, but they also had private property, private wealth, and private poverty. Reservations changed all that. It was the policy of the 19th century federal government to promote Indian poverty and dependence as a means to force Indians to assimilate or die. Many died, many assimilated, but many also hunkered down and survived. Many Indian reservations became socialist in all but name after that. During his brief tenure as Secretary of the Interior under President Ronald Reagan, James Watt said that the proof socialism does not work can be found on Indian reservations. He was right. Many tribes reacted with rage to his statement and demanded his resignation, but some reacted by choosing to change. And today we have tribes whose reservations are turning into engines of prosperity, not just for their members, but for their surrounding communities as well. My own tribe is in the process of doing that too. So while Trump might be bad for tribes that rely on government funding, for tribes and Indians who are ambitious to prosper and develop their own economies and businesses, Trump will be a very good president. Because, like most other Americans, we cannot help but benefit from living in a country that is more free, more secure, and more prosperous. That's what we should expect from Donald Trump, and that's why I support Trump for president.